presentation, but I am dying to hear it because he's got a couple of words that make my blood get really excited. Wearable, startup, and IoE.
IoT.
Well, IoE.
And IoE. And Berkeley
right.
also.
Exactly. And he's wearing Berkeley colors. Please tell us about the Internet of Everything, Michael.
Absolutely. So imagine a world where you spend as much time in virtual reality as in physical reality. Sensors on your eyeglasses instantly pull you into your news while you carry on business conversations in virtual worlds. Your smartphone projects messages on the palm of your hand. You go into your car drops you off a mile from your office because it decides that you need a little bit more exercise. It also records your conversations and suggests the books that you should read and what you can do to manage your mood and your relationships. So welcome to the Internet of Everything. This is where we're heading. The simple definition of IoT or IoE is everything is connected to and communicating via the Internet. So these are the big players: self-driving cars, smart meters on your appliances, consumer products, surveillance, and of course healthcare. So in healthcare, we're looking at things like robotic healthcare, robotic surgery. Would you rather have a surgeon who's tired, maybe had an argument at home, maybe drank a little bit? I actually borrowed this example. Or would you rather have the robot that has done the surgery successfully 100,000 times? What is it that humans add? What is it that machines add? Robotic diagnostics. Can a machine give a more accurate teleradiology read than a human teleradiologist? To be seen. Elder care. What about robot companions? We already have a movie about that, right? So when it comes into Hollywood, that's where we see it first, and then we see it in reality. Recently, the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science and Transportation held a hearing, and it was very optimistic about IoT. And it basically said that we should do everything we can to help drive the city economy. So this is the positive Silicon Valley optimism, the optimistic side of IoT, IoE. Now, in terms of legal issues, since I'm a healthcare and FDA lawyer, this is what I think about. There's some big issues. So number one, Gesundheit. Who owns the data? What about cybersecurity? Are things secure? What about botnets, hacknets? What about your refrigerator being taken over by someone on the other side of the world and doing things that we don't want to think about? What about liability? Who's liable if your sensors malfunction? Again, if they get taken over. Privacy. How and where should we release the data? What should we do to keep the data reasonably secure? And by the way, we're not only talking about HIPAA, we're also talking about state laws, which require that every company that has data keep that information reasonably private and reasonably secure. So these are some of the big legal issues. And control, again, the refrigerator example. Will it stop ordering cheesecake if it decides that you've had too much and you're too fat? So these are critical issues for ventures, and these are some common pitfalls. Now, in terms of regulation, we have an alphabet soup of agencies that are looking to regulate this. So most prominently and visibly right now, we've got the Federal Trade Commission, or the FTC. What does the FTC do? Does anybody know? People know? Okay.
They regulate the transfer of information.
Transfer of information rights. So truth in advertising. So every company is subject to regulation by the FTC for false and misleading claims. So what you say your products can do makes a difference. So the FTC is now regulating IoT, and it's setting out some basic principles. It released a report, and it said that every company has to make sure that its data is secure. Security must be built in from the outset. Also, consumers have to have notice of how their data is being used. They have to have the ability to opt out, privacy opt out. There are breach notification laws if the data leaks out. We're used to reading about this from insurance companies, millions of records, sensitive data released, so there are breach notification laws. FTC is involved in that as well. Now, FTC recently had an enforcement action against a company that was claiming to keep its data secure, but it turns out that hackers could get into the feeds of baby monitors. So these are the kinds of issues you might not think about as a startup, but you need to think about truth in advertising, privacy, and security. And there are a whole bunch of other agencies that are getting into the action with driverless cars, wireless medical devices, standards for technology, and so on. Now let's step back and look overall at how the healthcare, the $3.4 trillion health and wellness market works. Can you guys see me over there? I realize I'm on this like golden circle, but okay, I'm still connected to this part of the room. Okay. So, as a lawyer who represents clients in this space, I tend to think about the market in terms of products and services because they're different. So products typically are regulated by the FDA, like medical devices, dietary supplements, cosmetics, vaccines, biologics. These are largely FDA and FTC regulated. And we look at things like, what is the intended use of your product? Are you making claims? What kinds of claims are you making? The services side are things like professionals, labs, pharmacies, hospitals, people who deliver professional services. And we have a whole different set of laws that apply there. So this is a really huge map. And you want to be able to think about the different areas of law that might apply because they might crisscross. For example, if you have an app, you might want to think on the FDA side, is this a mobile medical app? Do the FDA rules apply? But also you're going to have terms of use, you're going to have privacy policies, so you'll have corporate and other areas of corporate law and other areas of regulation that apply. So just to give you an example of some of the broad questions that come to me. So somebody discovered a probiotic. When the mice consume the probiotic, they live longer and their tumors shrink. Can that be sold as a dietary supplement to consumers, to humans? And can you use that animal data? Or, for example, I have a medical spa and they are hiring doctors. Are they practicing medicine illegally? Or somebody wants to bring a topical product to market and it's for pain relief. Is that a cosmetic or is it a drug? So these are some of the threshold questions. So wearables, like many products, are disruptive. They're disrupting the market and they're at the cutting edge of law. And some of the big questions that arise, let me give you some examples. So let's say that a venture creates a virtual reality headset and it's going to be sold to children that have learning disabilities. So a threshold question is this an FDA regulated medical device or is it just a consumer product? Do I need to get clearance to get this to market? And it can make a big difference in terms of your budget, right? What about the claims that are made on the website? Can somebody say that this is a product for brain training or for focus or memory or concentration? Are those trigger words that are then going to trigger FDA or FTC scrutiny? And if there's a headset that's recording your levels of focus, is that subject to HIPAA? So practicing law is not binary. It's not just ones and zeros. There are a lot of judgment calls. And typically what people are saying is, how far into the yellow can I go before the light turns red? Or can you fit an octagonal peg into a hexagonal hole? Or is it better to ask for permission or forgiveness? That's a big question. So one of my clients said it's difficult to tell whether the business you're creating is legal enough. And that's a really interesting way to put it. Again, it's not binary. You have to have these questions answered at the outset. So let's say that someone invents an app or a wearable, and what it does is you take a picture of your skin, something suspicious, and you want to know, is there a risk of skin cancer? So if that information gets transmitted to a doctor on the other side of the world, and they make a diagnosis, what do we call that? We call that telemedicine. It's remote practice of medicine. So there are a whole bunch of issues associated with telemedicine. State licensing, do you have to see the patient in person? That's on the services side of the equation. But what if now the algorithm gets a little bit smarter and the machine itself tells you that you have a low, medium, or high risk of melanoma? Now suddenly, the device itself is making a diagnosis. So now you've got an FDA-regulated medical device. So do you see how claims can make a difference? Now somebody actually put this on the market, and it was taken off the market, not by the FDA, but by the FTC. Because what they said is when you put a healthcare product onto the market, you need to have competent and reliable evidence that that product does what you say it does. So if you don't have the evidence that you can really detect melanoma with this product, you can't say that it does. They will shut down the business. They will require you to disgorge your profits. they will stop your venture cold. No exit, no happy investors, right? So it's really important to get this straight at the outset. You have to be careful about the claims. Here's another example. There's a wearable that has a sleep tracking function, and recently, somebody may have read about this, somebody questioned whether the sleep tracking function does what it says it does. They made an argument that it doesn't. So people are actually getting less sleep than they think they're getting, right? So they're deceived. So it's false and misleading advertising. So if you say, for example, 50,000 consumers bought this product, let's say that how much is the extra 15 minutes of sleep worth? Let's say, I don't know, $1,000. Do the math. You come up with a multi-million-dollar claim for liability. So you have plaintiffs' law firms that are also going out there and looking for opportunities for these class action lawsuits. It's not just the government, it's also private plaintiffs. So on the lighter side, well, somewhat lighter, FDA tried to clarify things, this question about when is an app a mobile medical app and when is it just an app. And what it said is we're going to create 3 categories to help clear up confusion. These are the things that are mobile medical apps. These are the ones that aren't. And then everything else, case by case. So case by case means enforcement discretion, meaning it's really hard to predict what's going to happen. But basically, it's better than having everything be case by case. Now you can see if you fit into column A or B. So if you have an app in the healthcare arena, I encourage you to read the FDA's mobile medical app guides, because it's going to tell you, here's a long list of bucket A, here's a long list of bucket C, here's where we're inserting. So basically, what's a mobile medical app? It's something that transforms your device, your app, into a medical device. So when you attach, for example, a sensor or a lead to this, and you record and display EEG, ECG, then that becomes a medical device. If you measure the degree of tremor caused by Parkinson's, that's a medical device. Measuring blood glucose. We talked about the analyzing images of skin lesions. So those require the FDA clearance process, unless they're exempt. We can get into that more in the Q&A. However, things that are simply copying reference books or they're educational tools, they're simply logging and tracking information, those are outside the FDA purview. So that obviously it's going to be a lot easier for your venture if you have something in that category. Motivational guidance to quit smoking. I had a client who was doing hypnosis, smoke cessation systems. That's case by case. You have to be careful because things can very easily go into the disease treatment category instead of the general health category. I'll talk about that more in a minute. I see a lot of heads nodding, so I assume that people have crossed these thresholds, reached these thresholds, or are still puzzling them over. That's good. So now a second really important and useful innovation, FDA recently carved out from medical device regulation a category called general wellness products. So these are products where you make claims for general wellness. What's general wellness? It's not actually an army metaphor. It's we're talking about things that promote health. So the good thing about it is that you can say that your product helps address chronic conditions to the extent that it creates or promotes a healthy lifestyle. So if you're promoting healthy weight, you're encouraging healthy eating, and your product is low risk, like exercise equipment or video games or wearables and apps that don't fit into the mobile medical app category, then you might have a general wellness low risk product. But again, you have to be very cautious about the claims, and this is where lawyers can be useful to help you decide. For example, if you say promotes healthy weight, that's allowable. But if you say cures obesity, then that's a problem, right? You can say promotes healthy sleep. You can even say increases flow of qi. This is really interesting now. You have an FDA document that's incorporating traditional Oriental medicine. You can say reduces stress. You can say increases mental acuity. You can't say that it corrects ADHD. So these lines can be very thin. And to give you an example from the dietary supplement arena, because there's actually a lot of FDA literature more on dietary supplement claims, you can say, for example, that a product can help you fall asleep, right? But you can't say that a product helps you fall asleep if you're a person who has trouble falling asleep, because then you're talking about curing insomnia. Let me shift gears a little bit. So let's start with this quote, one of my favorite quotes from a science fiction book. The difficult we do immediately, the impossible takes a little bit longer. How many people feel like that? Right? So this is the path of medical technology. Science fiction is becoming science fact. And also the singularity is near, right? So this coming merger of human intelligence and machine intelligence that's being talked about in our lifetimes, in the coming decades, paradigm shifts are becoming so common that they represent a rupture of the fabric of human history. We're talking about successive paradigm shifts, one on top of the other. This is an oldie but goodie, but how many people have read the book Future Shock? So, right? So this is like Future Shock on steroids. That's what we're looking at. So is this utopia? Is this the dawning of a new civilization where we're going to transcend our biological selves, download ourselves into silicon or some other material, and coexist simultaneously biologically and non-biologically? Or maybe we'll favor one or the other. So the market is exploding with all sorts of innovation. You know this. We're talking about consumerization. We're talking about knowledge being transferred away from the exclusively professional domain, the doctor knows best, and a white coat coming to your house, toward knowledge being ubiquitous, being available everywhere to the ordinary consumer. You're part of that transformation. Predictive analysis, machines looking at trends and making conclusions and telling you what your likes and dislikes are, and changing our relationships and our buying patterns. Bionics, the increasing reliance on our tools and the integration with those tools. How long can you go without your cell phone? Okay, well, we'll leave that as a rhetorical question. So, let me check and ask. Siri, how long can I go without my cell phone? So when we think about applying a relatively static bunch of laws to a dynamic marketplace, we have a contradiction, right? Because from an innovator's perspective, it can seem like government and law is trying to shrink wrap regulation around innovation. But from our perspective, from the innovator's perspective, it's about becoming the CEO of your own health. So these two things are living side by side. And it's also important to think about the fact that we have to use our technology responsibly as well as innovatively. So I love this example from Nick Bostrom from Oxford University, and he argues that the biggest risk facing humanity is existential risk. It's risk to the species, to the planet, actually to the cosmos. And he gives the example that if we create an artificial intelligence where the program is create paper clips, as many as possible, it's capitalism, and utilize whatever means is at your disposal. Am I sounding like a old Star Trek episode? You know, the one where it just runs amok. And then finally they get it to tap into its emotions and it sort of self-destructs, but I don't think that's going to happen because we'll figure out how to program that too. But the AI could basically convert everything into a world of paperclips, everything, all resources, right, including us. So also we were talking earlier about people creating destructive biological devices, biohacking. Or what about the person whose BFF is an operating system? There's a movie about that, right? It's scary. So our devices are feedback machines. They analyze data, news, trends, patterns, habits, relationships, mood. They're constantly feeding back to us. So what I love about this technology is that the evolution of medicine, to me, is about the evolution of humanity. Because if we look at the paradigm shifts, we've got house visits, to office visits, to online visits, to mobile visits, to the wearable quantifiable self, to virtual reality, to humanoid robot visits, robots that will pass the Turing test, to brain-to-brain communication, telepathy through technology, to the downloadable self. This is the trajectory. And there are many other developments that we could put on this chart, like CRISPR, the new gene modification technology. What if you could do that on your phone and release that out into the world? Or 3D printed drugs and body parts. So even though we've got these creative regulatory developments that I think are very useful for ventures to understand where they fit, there are still some issues. So number one, The regulatory landscape really is a giant puzzle. I've just given you a few examples of where people are being challenged trying to figure out where their product fits. And these classification issues are so seminal, they're so important. You know, I have clients coming to me and saying, what should I do? Should I get my device patented first, or should I consult an FDA regulatory person to figure out what I've got? Or should I spend the money on marketing? This stuff is really, really important to have at the foundation. You just can't go down the road and figure it out later. What are the regulatory threats and opportunities, and what kind of strategy do you have to devise? And secondly, the line between data, speaking of wearables, what is data and what's medical information? And does data become medical once it goes to your doctor? When does HIPAA get triggered? When am I simply talking about fitness, and when am I talking about curing disease? What is general wellness, what's medicine? We have this line in the law, and it's a little bit arbitrary because everything that is coming out of Skydig, everything that's coming out of this room is really blurring the line. Partly because we've got a 19th century, a bunch of legal rules with a little bit of 21st century overlay and like a 25th century paradigm. That's what's happening. So that's the third issue, that technology is accelerating exponentially. Have you ever heard about legal rules accelerating exponentially and replicating at the nanoscale and improving generationally? I mean, you would need like super Solomons to do that, right? But technology is simply going at a completely different pace. So it's hard for the rules to keep up. So in part, we're at a crossroads where the rules themselves are really not adequate, no matter how much they morph to evolve and handle what's happening. I mean, we can be creative, we can be very clever, we can be innovative in terms of figuring out how to push products through, where to ask for permission, and where to ask for forgiveness. But law still mediates the technology's entry into the marketplace. It determines who gets to market, how quickly, how much it's going to cost, and what it's going to take. So that's where we are. We need a lot of wisdom, and as well as clever lawyering and clever business ideas. We need a different level of consciousness because since we're here talking about health, improvement in health technology, so the World Health Organization defines health as not just physical health, but also emotional health, mental health, and social well-being. And you can't have social well-being in a world that's only made up of paper clips, unless you're a paperclip, right? So that's the joke. Since I'm a lawyer, I have to actually point it out to people. So really, on a deeper level, I think we're at a race for the future of our species. So we have technology and the evolution of health on one hand and consciousness at the other. So as innovators, everybody here is at the forefront of that change. What we're really talking about is not just the evolution of health in a narrow sense as disease care, but also in its broadest sense. It's really about who are we becoming. Because what we're doing is we're creating the foundation for humanity and what we're going to be, not just tomorrow, but for the centuries and the millennia ahead. So thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.
Time for a couple of questions. First questions for Michael? Oh, all of a sudden everything.
So when you're talking about the mobile medical apps, what constitutes that and what does not constitute that? Like if you had, what about the